to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Hey, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. This is Tom Dutta, like Butta. I'm your host, and thanks for being back, everyone. The show is doing so great. We're booked out now for 3 months every week. We've got a wait list to get on the show, and thank you to you for making us successful. I want to put something on the screen here and share with you that the show in the last year and a half has been given some praise, again, because you've watched the show and also because of our great guests. We are now the number 2 top 30 CEO podcast rated by Feedspot out of California. That's the United States. We're top Canadian leadership podcast. And I didn't even know about Million podcasts, but apparently we're in the top 100 storytelling podcasts. And man, that's what we do here is we tell stories. So let me take that off the screen, get me back here. So we're live streaming. That means right now we're on X, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. And so if you have the chat feature there, you can put a comment. We'll put it on the screen. Maybe we'll get our guests to take a look at it, but let's just have some fun. And this will be live streamed for about an hour, and then we'll reproduce it as an official YouTube video premiere and international audio podcast. And that'll be coming up in the near future. But right after this stream, it'll be accessible. You can watch it right where you saw it at any time. So on that note, let me just set this up. We are going to tidy up all these little intros once I edit it out later, but stand by while I set up the introduction, what I call the show hook. Stand by, everybody. What would it be like to get to know our guest from the inside out? I want to ask you a question, and I want you to sit with it for a second before you answer it. What if the thing holding you back isn't your skills, isn't your experience, isn't your network or your resources, or even the opportunities in front of you? What if the thing holding you back is your own mind? And not because you're not smart enough, but because your mind has been quietly, systematically lying to you. I've been doing this show for a while now, and one pattern I keep coming back to, one theme that shows up in almost every conversation with exceptional people is this. The more talented you are, the more sophisticated your self-sabotage becomes. It doesn't look like giving up. It looks like perfectionism. It looks like overworking. It looks like not being ready. It looks like one more degree, one more certification, one more preparation before you take that leap. And it costs people quietly, invisibly, their careers, their confidence, and sometimes their entire sense of who they are. My guest today has spent 20 years watching this happen from one of the most, in my opinion, unforgiving places on earth, the entertainment industry. He's a talent agent who has placed actors in Netflix productions, Broadway shows, HBO projects, and he's watched extraordinary talent walk into a room and then find a way to destroy that opportunity. And he got so obsessed with understanding why is this happening that he went back to school. He earned a PhD in psychology, certified in clinical hypnosis and NLP, and he wrote a book that maps scientifically what's happening inside the minds of high performers who just can't get out of their own way. His name is Dr. Albert Bramante. His book is called Rise Above the Script. And what he has discovered applies not just to actors. I think it applies to every leader, creator, entrepreneur, every professional watching this right now. Because here's the thing, fear of success is real. Imposter syndrome is real. Patterns of self-sabotage keeps gifted people from playing big. And it's about psychology, and it can be changed. So Albert's going to show us how. I want you to stay with us because this conversation is going to challenge some things that you think you know about yourself. And I mean that in the best possible way. And this is the Quiet Warrior Show. I'm your host, Dr. Thomas Dutta, and it starts right now. So let's bring to the stage Paul. Hey, Dr. Bramante, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dutta. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Hey, what was it like sitting back and listening to your greatness for just a minute as I led that in?
I really enjoyed that intro. I couldn't have written it better myself. He's much better.
That's great. Now, when you came on, you told us where you're at right now. Just tell the audience where you're at physically.
So physically right now, I'm in my summer home in Calabash, North Carolina. And it's right in the Outer Banks area, not too far from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So right at the border. And other than that, I spend a lot of time in New Jersey, New York.
Yeah, well, we love our southern neighbors, British Columbia, Canada here, West Coast. And I've traveled your country a lot with my professional work. So it's great to have you here. Hey, Al or Albert, I call you what, Albert?
Al. Yeah, Albert's fine, yes.
Albert, are you ready to go into Plato's garden to tell some stories?
Let's go. Let's go into the garden.
All right, let's go into the garden, everybody. I love it. So I'm going to put something on the screen here, set this up. So stand by. What would it be like to go into Plato's garden to have some stories with Albert? Well, welcome to Plato's garden, everybody. And just for the audience, let me explain this. Albert, you may know this already. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece. And he was a founder of the Platonic school of thought in the academy, from Greek word academia. Apparently, it was the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. And, you know, you can see an image there of Aristotle and Plato, and they would walk and talk. They'd talk it out, and they have thoughts about their thoughts. It's called critical thinking. So what we're going to do, Albert, and you won't know I'm doing this, but we're going to weave your story through three areas to figure out what influenced the context of all your work in your life. And we will go into macro, which is like what was happening in the world around Albert that influenced his public work. And then mezzo, what was happening in the industry or the sector you work in. And then the third, it's my favorite, Albert, because it's about you, the man. What was happening in your personal life that may have influenced your public work? So let me take that off the screen here. And so to get us started into that, I'm just going to throw something out. We can just riff on it. So just get this here. So Albert, you wrote a book, Rise Above the Script, and it was built on real research, from what I understand, and real client stories. But before all of that, there was a moment where you stopped being just an agent and became something more. So can you take us back to that turning point?
Sure. Well, you know, I kind of stumbled into the agent career by accident. You know, it wasn't like something I aspired to do when I was a kid. As a matter of fact, I really had no aspirations to become a talent agent. I was so, determined to be a psychologist. I was going to major in psychology and earn a PhD and, teach on a collegiate level as well as have a practice. That was like my goal pretty much throughout my, my teenage years to my mid-20s. So I never really had the intention of having an agency, so to speak, or even work with actors. But I found myself through different experiences, in this path. So this happened by accident, not by that wasn't planned.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a fun there, a little happy accidents. We all have those. I remember I was saying to somebody in the last dialogue that sometimes we go a lifetime being placed in a place we don't really know why. Maybe it's because somebody said we should be there. Very interesting. In the research about you, I read that there's some Italian heritage in you. So just tell us a little bit about your roots and maybe even a bit about your parents, if you want.
Sure. Well, my my father's side, my grandfather was from Italy, and more Sicilian on the Sicilian side, and then my on my mother's side, my lineage is Napolitan. So I have both kind of coasts of Italy there in my blood. So unfortunately, I wasn't really blessed with the speaking Italian. No one really spoke Italian when I was growing up.
Yeah.
In my immediate family. But I just enjoy the traditions, like a family, the food, the music, and really just the vibe of things. So my, family, I think I'm probably third or fourth generation at this point.
Yeah.
As far as from Italian. I just enjoy being on the family events, the family dinners, the holiday dinners and all that, because they were very extravagant. And when I say extravagant, if anybody's been in an Italian family, it ranges from, loving to drama,
I'm
people
gonna jump.
storming out, cursing, and then
I get
20 minutes later making up.
I'm laughing with you, not at you. I'm jumping in right now because, as I told you off screen, my wife was born just outside of Rome, and I met her, and I came to Canada about the same time she did when I was just a kid. And so the first time we've been married 30 years, so I've been blessed. She's amazing. But the first time I walked up the back stairs, so the big Italian garden, the house, 5 kids, back stairs, table covered in a plastic sheet, and the Damigiana wine and all the food. And I swear to you, Albert, before I walked in the room, I thought there was 50 people in there. I walk in and there's about 5. And then throughout the years, because I come from a very different background, my family broke apart. My dad divorced my mom. He was a drinker. It's like they'd be having fun, laughing, and then once in a while a little right fist would come out, and you punch each other up, and then you're forgiving. And sometimes the level of dialogue, the sound would be loud, and me and my brother-in-law, who was German, would step out of the room and go, "We can't handle this anymore."
Yeah.
But overall, the experience, it just left a mark on me as one of the greatest things about the strength of family.
And I used to get a kick out of when we had other people would come in, when my brothers would date, or my cousins would, bring home, partners of different ethnicities. And, one of the themes that when I was here is, why is everyone screaming at each other? Like, no, we're not. We're just happen to talk very loud.
Yeah. And by the way, you said you didn't grow up speaking a lot of language, but I'll tell you right now, when you watch his back, you speak Italian with your hands, man, because they're going.
Oh, yeah.
They're going. Okay, let me throw this back out. We're back in Plato's Garden here, everyone, with Albert. Dr. Albert, congratulations on your PhD.
Thank you.
And your work. I'm going to put this image on the screen. I want you to tell us what we're looking at. What is that?
So that is my book, my first book, called Rise Above the Script.
Yeah.
And it was part of my doctoral dissertation, based on my doctoral dissertation.
Yeah.
And it was born out of necessity, because when I first started as a talent agent and working in the representation space, one thing I noticed was that a lot of actors were self-sabotaging, shooting themselves in the foot, getting in their own way. And as I was saying before, it's an incredibly intense profession to be in. It's a tough profession. I've said this on other podcasts. You're dealing with hundreds of thousands of actors with only a limited number of roles. So really almost 97% of all actors are going to be out of work, constantly out of work.
Wow. That's incredible.
And that's a high number.
Yeah.
But what also makes it sometimes even more difficult, or compounding that difficult, is when you get in your own way as an actor.
Yeah, let's pause on that, and we're going to go back Plato's and draw more out of the story. But the image itself, if you can just tell me quickly, I think the cover is really cool. It's striking. What's that supposed to signify? Who's the little person there?
So the little person is really in your mind, and the state, the curtains represent your internal mind.
I see. Okay, very cool. So let me take that off the screen now, and let's get back into Plato's. So Albert, you blend things, in my opinion, most people keep separate, like psychology, hypnosis, NLP, and you can explain what NLP is if you want. And now things like AI tools. When did you realize that the answers to performance weren't just in strategy, they were in the science of this thing, the mind?
Well, since I was doing this, and since I became an agent, and then of course, for my doctoral dissertation, I actually did a scientific study, relative as a scientific process.
Yeah.
To look at, like, why are actors getting in their own way? Why are they, shooting themselves in the foot, if you want to say that in a metaphorical sense? Why is this happening? And a lot of it has to do with fear, and and also other types of habits and strategy. And the one thing that I've found is, while acting training is important, and I recommend every actor should have some solid acting training, like conservatory and method training, but that is not enough. And this is where I make it a little controversial here. That's not enough. It's great and it's important, but it's not enough. Mindset is just as important.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I was listening to it yesterday, and so we'll talk about the book later, and I got a surprise for you. But I want the audience to get the book And I'll tell you why this book is for a lot more than just actors. But I like the audiobook experience, Albert, because I have some visual limitation after concussion, and I tend to like listening. But also then I take the physical book, it's just a great experience. Let me go back into Plato's. We're still in micro. Let me just put this to you. You mentioned in your outreach to the show, so when we connected, that your work with actors mirrors what you see with leaders and creators everywhere. People using AI tools, people struggling with their purposeful driven work. And people are disengaged, not from laziness, but from this fear you talk about. So what does a Hollywood talent agent have to teach a business leader or entrepreneur if you go further than just acting space?
Well, it has a lot to do with how you package and brand yourself.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things, if you really want to succeed, this is not just for acting, there has to be something that differentiates you from the back. So there has to be your own story. You have, and so there's an important thing about also vulnerability. I think that's important when you're telling your story.
Yeah.
Because what makes you unique? I mean, there's, hundreds of people in your field, thousands of people in your field, but there's no one that's going to be like you.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think that has to come in with. Be more comfortable with being vulnerable, comfortable with being, feeling seen and being okay with that, with putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mind's going on a journey here when you say that. I'm thinking, now I'm not an actor, right? But I've done things like TED Talks, and I've felt what it's like to stand on a stage and feel fear. But I always used to think like actors can adapt characters and portray different personalities. And so it must be easy for them to show vulnerability, to kind of peek out behind a mask and show who they are. I mean, maybe even fake it. But it seems like from reading the book that absolutely is challenging. So I find that fascinating. Let me ask you this. Might weave now into what I call mezzo, which is the sector, and I'll call this the business impact. So in that beautiful book, you talk about something most people never name: the fear of success, not failure. And I use terms up front in the intro like psychological or imposter syndrome. And so to me, it sounds kind of backwards. Not failure, success. How does that actually show up in someone's life? And what does it look like when you're watching it happen with a client?
So it's a very sneaky fear. And it's one of those fears that are subconscious. It's no one fears success. We're all chasing it. And that's where a lot of people may not understand when I speak fear of success. It's not necessarily success in itself that we're afraid of. It's the change, the impact, the ramifications of it. So let's say, you land as an actor, a life-changing role. Now your identity is going to change. Your identity has to change, which means that you're no longer you're going to be in the spotlight. There's going to be a lot of pressure on you. Now you may experience, in your social circle and your familial circle, jealousy, estrangement, and people that may not be rooting for you, because they're dealing with their own insecurities. And as a matter of fact, I was listening to, this relates to a story. I was listening to watching a biography, like a documentary on a TV psychic, someone who has a national TV show, international TV show. And the one thing that he said that really stuck with me was when he got the contract and got the role. He's been doing a show for a number of years. A lot of people in his immediate family stopped associating with him.
Wow.
And he was very disappointed, but not surprised. And that really resonated with me. It's like, this makes a lot of sense because of their own insecurity, maybe, or sometimes they felt threatened by that. And that's going to be scary because we're wired as human beings to be connected and to be loved and
that's interesting.
Be part of a tribe, and that will supersede anything. And if your success or whatever the outcome is can threaten that fabric of that connection, we're going to do everything in our power to hold on to it on an unconscious level. Our brain is designed to do that.
Yeah. Let me just add some of the stage here. You can see my camera, my in-camera studio camera. I got a piece of paper. It's already filling up with Albertisms and things like that. But I wrote down on my paper here a couple of things: fitting in, rejection, Robin Williams. So I want to just riff with you for a minute. You know, this thing about this sad thing about Robin Williams. He was one of my. I'm not saying he was an idol, but I admired him, and he was one of my favorites. And so I want to give it back to you. Just comment about this part. If there's anything perspective you had on Robin, who appeared to be extremely successful, who could command the audience, but obviously lived in his head in a different space. And then when I was thinking about what you said about actors who get roles and then family members or people sort of disconnect or don't want to connect with them for various reasons, man, I experienced that as an author. I wrote my first book, which was a hard-hitting book about my life with my alcoholic father. And then it was a memoir about my role seeing the world as a CEO. And some close family members really gave me a hard time with it. One of them didn't talk to me. One of them made issues. And I think that's part of what you're talking about, right? So just take it back and talk about some of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes against the very fabric. Say, you have a lot of A-list actors, and Robin Williams being one of them. You know, they have all the success, they have the money, they have the fame. But at the end of the day, what's really going to make them whole is those connections, those people. Yeah. And a lot of times with actors, especially the A-list actors, a lot of people associate the characters they play to the actor. You know, we see Robin Williams as this fun-loving, comedic, sidekick type of character, but very often we're not seeing for Robin Williams a human being, which is much more than that.
Yes.
And that's, I think he also felt lonely, and I think because
that's interesting.
Yeah, he had all these people around him, but they were around him because he was a celebrity.
Yes.
Now if he was a plumber or a librarian, he wouldn't have any access to those crowds he had. They're only with him because of that. And that's where a lot of A-list actors struggle with is, now I have an entourage. I have millions of people that are, chasing me down on the streets wanting to talk to me, but they're not wanting to talk to me for me. They want to talk to me because they want to be, elevating themselves because they're around the celebrity.
Yeah, that's really resonates with me. Put the book back. Everybody here with Dr. Albert Bramante, the author of Rise Above the Script, one of his books, and just completed a PhD around that. I just want to change the view there. If you look in the background, you'll see in my studio maybe some interesting artifacts, and these are masks. And I kind of consider us connected in a way through our education. I just finished my doctorate February 12th, and it was titled Unfolding The Quiet Revelation, Unfolding Identity in a Complex World. I spent the whole time researching human beings and particularly my own identity. And what I'm finding is that particularly in the business world where I come from, we have this persona, we're performative. And so, we characterize, if I'm a CEO or a leader or an actor, I'm stepping in front of people with a mask on. The organization or the environment creates that persona. But very few people will step away from it, and some don't even know how. And I was thinking about what you said about Robin. If I can share this with you, I was at a not-for-profit that specialized in mental health many years ago, and I was talking to them, and one of the people who was actually a homeless, or I call them marginalized people, was there listening, and he stood up and he said that we were talking about Robin Williams, and he says the last time Robin Williams came to town, he came through this area where these people are on the street. And he said he sat for an hour with me and he talked to me. And then we found out that in his contracts, I researched this somehow, he would say to his production people, he needed to have, people from that community working as volunteers. So he had this big heart. But I'm wondering what you think about this, because Jim Carrey's another name, and I'm digressing here into actors, but we'll come back to your body of work. Like, I watched Jim Carrey growing up, right? And he was always goofy and great and amazing. But I'm almost wondering if those guys, what was going on in their lives caused them to put on these masks and become somebody else to cover that up. So perhaps they were sad or having difficulty a long time ago.
Well, Jim Carrey is very layered, layered performer.
Yeah.
Right. Very layered performer. And the fact that, we do see him as this comedic sidekick. We do see him as this, someone who, has a larger than life personality on screen. I watch him in Living Color, his breakout roles. But he's a very deep, complex individual. If you saw him off camera, or talk to, in interviews, he's very intellectual, very grounded. And a lot of times it could be a defense mechanism. That's why even stand-up comedians, for instance, are sometimes struggling with a lot internally.
Yeah.
And they're using their humor as a defense mechanism, and I suspect that a lot with Jim Carrey too.
Yeah, I think I understand that. And going back to leadership, I was a high level, or I still am, but I'm a founder of my own platform, a CEO in industry. And I think I was hiding behind the persona of the big title and the big paycheck and the responsibility and all that comes with it, because I came from a broken beginning. I mean, broken childhood and all these things that I experienced. And there was a part of me that was missing my identity. So I felt whole when I put on a suit and stepped out in front of people and had all this authority. But the truth is, that's who I wasn't. I want to talk about the book for a minute, and then we'll get back into Plato's. Are you having fun, Albert?
I'm enjoying this immensely, yes.
I feel like we should be picking up a glass of wine and toasting. Speaking of toast, I'm just going to put a comment that came in on LinkedIn. So we have live people watching us. Grant Tate, one of our former guests, just said hi to us. And of course, to you too. Hey, yeah. So the book itself, people can read it, obviously, but I kind of was fascinating. It was there was parts. So part one seemed to be self-esteem, the foundation. Part two was self-efficacy, sort of the engine. Part three I wrote as personality, the landscape. But I remember thinking to myself, people should read part 4 first, which is fear, the hidden ceiling, I call it. So anything you want to say about why you structured the book the way it is?
Well, I kind of structured it, based on my doctoral dissertation.
I see.
That's how I started when I did my literature review. I says self-esteem, personality. But I also put things in every chapter to kind of like it all ties together.
Yeah.
In a sense. Because I also feel like at the core of it is the fear. I think that's the main driver of self-sabotage.
Yes.
Is fear. And until we can have conversations on that, because there's a lot of people talk about self-esteem, and a lot of people talk about self-efficacy, but fear is really success. Fear of success is the one thing a lot of people aren't speaking enough about.
Yeah. Is it true, like from a neuroscience point of view, you can't have a negative, positive thought at the same time? And I understand that we're, like you use the word wired, but brains are created for safety, right? So you're always looking for danger. And so is that kind of why, this whole thing about fear can be so powerful in holding us back?
Absolutely, because that's what fear really is, a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
There are legitimate times to be that fear will save our lives. Now, I'm talking if we go from a strictly Darwinian perspective, or an evolutionary perspective, that's what kept us alive. That's what helped us avoid, becoming prey. That's what avoided or succumbing to different conditions is by having fear that prepared us to fight or flight, run or fight for our lives. And so now we're in a much more sophisticated time period, but our brain still is the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Unconscious bias, right? You can have unconsciously, your brain kind of makes decisions, I think, before you even consciously can rationalize. Hey, back into Plato's, you work with hypnosis and NLP. I read that in your info and saw it a bit in your book. And these are tools I think most business audiences have heard of, at least my friends, but many few understand. Can you, in like simple terms, what does it mean to rewire someone's mindset, or why can't willpower alone do it?
Well, willpower requires energy.
Okay.
And we only have finite amounts of energy. And when we're talking about like almost like you want to look at the brain like as a computer. So that's where the idea of neuro-linguistic programming comes in. It's kind of like reprogramming the mind. So by changing the core, you're not going to even need to use willpower, because willpower requires a fight, and very often a fight that you're going to lose. That's why willpower enough isn't going to work.
Interesting.
Unless you change, the core programming. And so that goes based on limiting beliefs that we have. So again, I'm not good enough. And a lot of this starts from our childhood, from our parents,
Yes.
from our early teachers, from our early family members and our early interactions. They stick with us all throughout life. And so sometimes it's about just changing that inner belief that, I'm not good enough, or I'm not, worthy enough, or struggle has to be part of my existence.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. You told us a lot there. Everybody come back and listen to this part of the show. Dr. Albert Bramante just schooled us there about, the mind and limiting beliefs and thoughts that come from early years. If you look again at my studio, I like to show off Mr. Brain. You see that brain there? It's a real replica. And if you did some research on me, my audience knows I fell on my head in the bathtub while doing a ride to raise funds for cancer in 2018 and had a pretty serious brain injury. So I got into studying the brain, like that thing back there. It's a replica, and you can take it apart, etc. And what you said really resonated when I started realizing some of the things I think and the way I see the world is because of things that maybe my dad said to me off the cuff when he had a few drinks or whatever. And this last story I want to share with you, Albert, you kind of got it out of me. I was actually sitting in an audience at a TED Talk years ago before I did my own. And this guy got on stage, and I won't say his name, but he lived in I think it was an 8x8 city block, as a addicted homeless man. And so he had overdosed 6 times, as he told his talk on stage. He should have died 6 times over. Mm-hmm. Today he's come through that, and he's got married, and he's got kids. He's a different guy. But afterwards, he came off stage, and he's a pretty tough looking guy, right? Tattoos, bald head, really, like, you want to kind of be aware. And he looked at me and I said, "Hey man, what's your story?" I said, "You're telling us all this stuff, but how did you get on the street like that? Like, why did you have all that anger? Why did you give up and try to, take yourself out?" And he says this, he says, "You know what?" He said, "I wished he would have punched me in the face instead of saying what he said." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "My father." I said, "What do you mean?" His dad happened to be Italian, which is interesting because we're talking about Italy. He said he would call me stupid, no good. And afterwards, I left that conversation going like, it was like a breakthrough. It's like, my God, it would have been easier if you just decked him, because then the thought of what you're no good, you're worthless. And that had him doubting himself throughout his life. So anyway, I'm going to get back into Plato's here, but you're really bringing out a lot of interesting things for us to think about. This one you mentioned in your notes to me that you use, and I've read in the book too, that you use tools like ChatGPT and Cloud. These are AI, large language models, as part of how you coach creators and educators. You seem to see it differently than some people who think they're productivity tools. So can you just explain what do you actually do with that?
Sure. Well, you can use them as productivity tools. I like to kind of say it helps refine your message. So, yeah, and helps refine, who you are, as long as, again, you're putting your own voice into it. So when I work with any of the large language models, the one thing that I've learned, because I've done a lot of, trial and error and learning here, is you have to program it to sound like you. You can't just expect it to get things right, to create content or do anything for you off the cuff. It's just it really, almost, if you think of like predictive type text, that, model. So it's going to sound robotic if it's not like you. It'll give you the content. If I said, write me an article on, meditation, it's going to write me an article, but it's going to sound like, something out of Wikipedia or something out of, encyclopedia. It's not going to be anything that would really sound like me. So it has to train like me. So one of the things I work with people is like, okay, so feed it a couple of articles that you've wrote, or blog posts, or even Facebook posts that you did in your own voice without any help. and then ask it to analyze your writing. And that's what it does. It's great at analyzing. That's one of the things
Yeah.
that it's really great at doing. So I said, okay, then it gives you an analysis. So now you create something in your custom instructions, which is in your preferences area, of the large language model. And you say, okay, now respond like this. So now you start to. It's still you still have to put your own element into it. So there's something that we call human in the loop
Yeah.
when it comes to AI generation. So if you're going to use AI, I don't use the AI generator. Use AI assistant
I see.
because it still should be your own voice. So even after I program it to do a lot of these things, you still have to put your own. You still have to revise it, massage content,
Yeah.
put your own stories in there, and it just becomes a tool. It's a tool. It's not a replacement.
Sure. That's right.
And,
Yeah, you're preaching to the converted here. I've used Claude extensively, ChatGPT as well, and I'm starting to use Google Gemini. And I've taken some courses, and I recommend everyone listen to what Albert's saying. I believe, Albert, that if you're in today's game, in business or in the world, you'll get left behind. You need to understand these tools and how to use them and apply them. So I'm fascinated that you would apply it and use it in coaching, because I do executive coaching, and I think that's really cool. The thing you said about uploading articles, I took a course on how to prompt AI. So for most people who don't know, when a prompt is like me, say I'm the manager of Albert, and I say, Albert, I'd like you to do this. I'm prompting Albert to do something. With AI, you have to prompt it. So you're really interacting, as you said. But I uploaded my script from a public talk I did, a TEDx talk a long time ago. And man, it did change the game. All my writings and collaboration after, AI took it and learned from it about how Tom speaks. And it's pretty interesting. Let's get into macro, the last segment, and to call this the global influences of things. So let's just say, for example, Albert, that you grew up in the Great Depression. I'm giving this for the audience to context. And so, you kid, you're growing, and then all of a sudden you develop your public work. Well, maybe growing up in the Great Depression, having less than more, gave you different views of the world and influenced you. So that's what we're doing here about macro. So I'll throw this out to you. We live in a world obsessed with hustle, in my opinion. Go, go, go. Work harder, move faster, grind. And yet your entire life's work, in my opinion, is built on the opposite idea that, people aren't stuck because they're lazy. They're stuck because of what's happening in here, the mind. So why do you think the world hasn't gotten this message yet? Because I don't think it's slowing down. We don't stop.
No, and that's going to be a problem, because you never know with the technology boom that's happening.
Yeah.
Whether they might be a brownout or a blackout.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we're on our own. Now I'll relate this to a story. Years ago, well, maybe like 13, 14 years ago, we were affected with a major hurricane called Hurricane Sandy, which is 2012. Now, most of us, at least in my area, my part of the world, we lost power for a week.
Can't imagine that, man.
Yeah, no, everyone was losing their mind, and I found comical, because I'm sitting there saying, like, because people are like, what do I do with myself? I'm like, talk to your neighbor, go outside, talk to people, read a book, under candlelight, whatever, and that's because, again, if you were during the Depression or even earlier than that, that's what you did on a daily basis. So, and I definitely believe we're in a hustle and grind culture, but I also think that if you're in that 24/7, it's not good to be hustling and grinding 24/7. We need to have time to decompress. And so if I was growing up in the Great Depression, I would probably read a lot of books, which I do now. But I would also spend time talking to people, going out and interacting with people, because that doesn't require any money.
Yes.
To learn from people.
Yeah, I was, again, into the book, Albert's book, when I was listening to the audiobook. There's deep parts of it that really helped me learn, particularly about being with other people, interacting with other people. And I explored that a bit in my own personal development. I said this in my own writing. Albert, it's funny because when I grew up as a business leader and got into senior leadership, this goes back in my career, I honestly thought that you were on your own. Like, it's lonely at the top. Don't ask for help. Don't show weakness. Be tough. Toe the company line. All this pressure I felt in my head, and you know this from coaching people. I didn't have anyone to turn to. And so I never imagined maybe I should go have coffee or sit down and engage with other people, have relational dialogue. And then I started learning later in life that as I'm talking to you, for example, you're giving me permission to see part of me in your story. And it's fascinating because without that knowledge, I have like neural adaptations. I make things up. I just make up stories on my own. And then when I sunk into depression after my concussion, I learned through therapy that mental illness, depression, it's about comes from ruminating with your thoughts, not engaging with people. So fascinating. You taught us a lot there. Let me put this back to you. With everything you see, again, we're still in macro, the disengagement crisis at work, the mental health conversations happening everywhere, this AI revolution, changing the way people create and lead others. So what do you think is the most dangerous belief people are walking around with right now? I know that's a very broad question.
I would probably have to say that I have to do this alone. I need to do this alone.
Yeah. Wow. You can go back to what I read in your book about psychotherapy and talk therapy and just needing to engage and talk it out. Yeah. Interesting. You've worked with talented people. This is one of the cool things about your background. I want you to talk about, if you can. Like, you work with people who found their way into Netflix productions, Broadway, HBO. I don't know if you can mention any names, like cool stories of people you met. But the second part of the question is, what does peak performance look like at that level? And what's the honest truth about what it costs people who get there without doing their own inner work first?
Well, it can cost a lot. I'll just look at Robin Williams, look at Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, so it can cost a lot. And peak performance is really about being, on top of what you can do, but also at the same time taking care of yourself. And that's where I think a lot of those other people lack. Heath Ledger, for example, was a really talented actor. And one of the roles he was well known for was, I think, part contributed to his downfall, and that was A Dark Knight. And that eventually just led to his downfall. And so that was sort of, I think, at the end of his career, like playing that dark role, he didn't do the inner work.
I see.
Again, it was just, okay, you're playing a character going to a dark space.
Wow. This is very interesting. I just got that point, man. You're a good orator. When you said that about that role with him, I knew about his story, but I never really deeply made the connection about him embodying the dark role. And that's a dark space. It made me think just now about, tell me what you think about the word reverse trauma, because I heard that like 911 operators, after a while, you can get PTSD because you're transferring trauma, right?
And that's very valid. I mean, it's called reverse trauma, or even secondhand traumas too, which is like secondary, because you're traumatized all the time. You're experiencing that world, and you're not decompressing. You're not engaging in enough self-care, and that's part of, like, if you're going to take a job on that, whether it's brace intervention or trauma work, in the field of trauma, there has to be a time where you have to have a ritual kind of like pre-planned. Self-care is important. Making sure you're sleeping right, you're eating right, that you're really taking care of yourself. And as hard as it is, you do have to leave the work at the office. And it's like kind of like like the athlete, leaving the game on the field. Yeah.
That made me smile because you're at your summer home for 4 months, and here I'm saying, here's an example of somebody goes away and leaves the office behind for a while, and maybe you find that. Hey, Albert, in your book, I know the answer, but I want you to tell the audience. You said look after yourself. So there's many little things people can do, but do you chronicle some of those things in the book?
Sure. Well, look after yourself is, again, sleep. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you're getting enough sunshine, vitamin D. And then also your social circle. is very important. That Tony Robbins said this. That as well as Jim Rohn. Your proximity is key here. So you want to hang out and support yourself and surround yourself with people that are going to elevate you. And one of the hard truths, Sal, and I know you can relate this, Tom, is that may not come from your family.
Yeah.
That may not be your family, unfortunately. But you still should find your own tribe that supports you and elevates you, because that is so important. Because if you're around people that are negative or pessimistic, judgmental, that's going to rub off on you. And what's going to wind up happening is you're going to become negative, start become negative and pessimistic. So wow. Is auditing your social circle.
Man, my brain's going on journeys here. You just opened up a whole another dialogue. I was thinking about so many things. One of them is I know people who are younger who are talented and creative. Like when I was in high school, we had a big theater in our school. I was blessed to have that. And they had the drama club. And there were certain kids in my class who were just like distracted. They couldn't sit at a desk all the time, but they were uber creative. And you could tell that they were born to be actors. But they faced that criticism from their parents, go get a real job. You'll never make money in that.
Right.
You want to be a pro soccer player. No. Go do this. Tell me what you think of this, but I believe that parents, like my mom's still alive. She's 90. My dad passed in 2018 and he left home when I was 12. So there's a lot to that. I love him, but he was a bad dude. Mm-hmm. And you basically are shaped and learn to love the world the way you saw it with your child brain. You learned how to show affection, how to talk to people. And it drives me crazy because everything you said makes so much sense. I wish this next generation of people would take courses and learn to be parents and how to give feedback. And so I'll explain this to you my way. If I don't like something you do, Albert, I can say, Albert, stop being a jerk. That was a stupid thing you did. Or I can say, Albert, I really love you, or I like you, man. But that thing you did, that behavior, that I don't like. So we got to change it. So what I'll finish with here is I learned through my own studying of the brain that the brain doesn't know the difference between our words and our voice. So if I say, Albert, you're stupid, your brain thinks you're stupid and it buries it and it plays. But if I say, Albert, I love you, you're a good guy, but this thing you did is stupid, the brain can differentiate it. I just think that nobody talks about parenting skills much, but I think you touched on that, opening a door. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, and that's a very good point and I'm going to say this, another kind of maybe controversial with some. Praise is the same way.
Yeah.
Where we should be praising the action, not an overall thing of, oh, you're a good boy today, or you're, what you should be saying is what you're doing is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we make judgments on people like that, like you're a bad person, or or as parents say, you're a bad boy or a bad girl. And again, I grew up in a family which again didn't have psychology. So here comes the troublemaker again. And now with all my training, I would strongly advise not to do that. Because again, it starts to settle in like I'm a bad person. I'm a troublemaker.
Yeah.
And it may not land when you're a child. You may be laughing like, but it's going to seek in. It's going to somewhere along the line, it's going to stick. And then you're going to start to believe, man, I'm such a bad person,
Yeah, and if we think about it, they say all this stuff about breaking the generational chains of trauma. Imagine if we all just learned to talk that way. The next generation of children would grow up to be better adults. I want to put something on the screen to honor you here. Our friend Grant Tate came back and just a really insightful comment. It's permanently etched there now. Experience without actors is relevant to us all, he says. We're all actors on a stage. Absolutely. I don't know. I think he might have said that because I'm in Canada and the band Rush said something about that. We're getting to the end of the Plato's Garden here. Let me just put something out. The last piece here I call the unwritten chapter, and have some fun with this. You're an author, so it kind of fits about writing books. So your book is called Rise Above the Script. We know that. If you had to identify the biggest script or the biggest false story that holds back most people you've ever worked with, your actual clients, what do you think it is?
I think what's holding them back again is that self-doubt. And
Yep.
that's, you know, it's like, even as an actor, I mean, like, okay, they tell you as an actor, you're supposed to throw it all out there. But then there's part of it, like, again, if you grew up in a critical household, is that maybe even that 10% could be, you know,
Yeah.
am I doing it? Am I doing too much? Am I being too much? Am I doing, you know, this and that? How are other people going to think? So
Sure.
another thing we have to get out of is a people-pleasing mindset. Like, you know, the one thing that we're again, coming from the connection standpoint, we're afraid of disappointing people. We're afraid of alienating people. And the paradox is that that's going to also hold us back. So in our, you know, work, there has to come a point where we have to get, you know, almost get away from that, where it's like, okay, you know, it's inevitable. There's going to be times where we're going to,
Yeah.
we're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and we have to be okay with that.
Wow. You know, going back to the some of the famous actors have really done well. You know, I'd love you to do a PhD and analyze some of those people, because I would imagine some of them, like I think about people like Al Pacino, and I say that not to talk about him on the show particularly, but he had an audiobook I found on Spotify where I listened, and it was amazing. I didn't know his story. Man, if you haven't heard it, I did not know his roots and what he came through. And yet I think he was one of the greatest actors I've seen anyway. And I was thinking, like, he must have really had it all together, because all of the challenges he had growing up, while he's on stage going into that performative state, he's controlling his mind. He's managing all that stuff. So pretty amazing. Let me put this to you. Over 20 years, a PhD, a book, clients at highest levels. Where are you still growing, and what's the chapter of Albert that hasn't been written yet?
Well, I think the chapter of me is more about more books, you know, that planning to put out, being more of the, you know, the influencer type now, because I've always been behind the scenes type of guy, you know, always been the one that was, you know, I'll work behind the scenes. And ever since I read the book, you know, I was like, no, I have to, in this whole, you know, social media and public, you know, facing is kind of new for me, you know, putting myself out there. And,
you do a good job.
Well, thank you. So, and I'm going to continually work on it, you know, and so that's going to be more of the next phase for me. It's just putting myself out there. I'm starting my own podcast. I'm going to be, you know, creating my own, you know, courses and things like, you know, that. So, you know, starting my own YouTube channel. So there's going to be more of that, you know, and, you know, 5 years ago, I would have been terrified if you told me I
Well, you know, I'll give you where's my soundboard here? I'm giving you some free, cheap applause there. You just demonstrated us, man. I don't know if you know you did it. That could be a viral clip that I take out of this on how to do it in fear, because you just told us. But you're right, to get in front of a camera, like when I first started doing this, and I'm going to let you in on a secret that I've told people a few times. When I look in the camera, I don't think I look very handsome. I think I look ugly. And it comes from some internal wiring. So it really is like pushing through the fear. Congrats if you're going to create your course and podcast, stepping out, because I think your dissertation, the work you did, is making an impact in the world. And if you don't step into your fear, man, we wouldn't hear from you. We wouldn't grow this way. Let me throw one more question to you, and then I'm going to honor you with a couple things. If you could whisper one sentence in the ear of every high achiever watching this right now, not just actors, someone who's talented, who's working hard, but who feels kind of stuck, what would you say to them?
30 words, you are enough.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to write that down. You are enough. Why are those words, they seem so simplistic, but why is it so powerful? What does it do?
Because that's all we're fighting with. It's like, you know, am I doing this? Am I, you know, there's something I'm not doing. It's like, oh, you know, you do something and you start to say, but I could have done that. And then I could have done that. And you start beating yourself up, you know, and it goes into a looping effect. Like, I should have said this.
Exactly.
You know, like even in our interview, like if I could have said, well, man, I wish I said that. And that could have been on my mind all night long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, no, we're human beings. You know, there's always going to be, you know, that happening.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is enough. And that's why I think you are enough is, you know, simple but powerful.
And it seems to me like when you say it and I hear it, I actually feel good because it's a positive thought. But it seems to me from what you've taught us in your book that I read, that when you do these affirmations, that what I call them, the brain actually can change the neural pathways. It can actually create that thought about yourself. So it's like all of a sudden you start hearing, you wake up one day and you go, wait a minute, I'm enough. I feel good. I feel like Tom's a good guy.
Yeah.
But you can, to use your language, program it, which is part of what the brain can do, right? Change its pathways, its thoughts. Very cool. So Albert, are you ready to be honored with a couple of awards?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I noticed your door peeked open there. Hopefully.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. That's part of being live. That's why we do this. It was kind of fun. Now I want to ask you, who was that and what's their story? Okay. So Albert, I've read the book and we're going to reveal a review. It's an international review because it's from Canada for your book. So let me just set this up here. And while I'm setting it up, it'll take me about 30 seconds. Tell everybody again why you wrote this book. I know it's a dissertation kind of, but why did you do this?
I wrote the book because there are so many actors that were really getting in their own way and really hurting their own chances of success in a very competitive industry to begin with.
Yeah.
So my hope is to have more conversations in this matter and bring more awareness that this is a realistic possibility. And let's rise above, our internal script, that's in our mind. So again, let's end the cycle of self-sabotage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that word self-sabotage because most people don't even know what it means. But when you break it apart, it leads back to something we all do unconsciously, probably every minute of the day, over and over again. I'm going to add this, take that book off the stage. And so I'm going to add this to the stage. So I'm sharing now. Tell me if you see it, this screen here. And if I scroll up, I'm actually on Audible. You know what Audible is, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. So Albert's book is in different formats, paperback, etc. But this is Audible. And so you can listen to it. So you can see there. And if you scroll down, what appears is this cool guy, Tom Dutta, just put a review up there. So I'm gonna read it. Now, Albert, I have some challenges with my vision close-up, so I'm gonna lean in a bit. So just bear with me while I do that. And I want you to sit back and just enjoy this. It's there now, and it's part of your work. So just stand by. Today we're revealing the 5-star international review written by Tom Dutta, me, on Audible for Albert's new book, and you've been hearing about it this morning. So here we go. Title is Mitigating Burnout for High Achievers. 5 stars is what I rated it across different areas. I host a show about quiet warriors, people who lead with depth, not noise, and I have interviewed hundreds of them. So when I say rise above the script, stop me cold, I meant it. I expected a book about actors. What I found was a book about all of us. Now, Albert Bramante has done something I haven't seen before done. He spent 20 years sitting across from gifted, driven, talented people as their agent, as their coach, as their psychologist. And he watched them succeed, fail, sabotage, and sometimes break. And then he went back to school, earned a PhD, and asked the question most people are too uncomfortable to ask. Why do talented people get in their own way? The answer is in the book, and it is not what you expect. It's not about working harder or about smarter goal setting. It's about the hidden interior world, the self-esteem that needs to be anchored internally, not earned from outside. The fear of success, yes, fear of success, that quietly dismantles more careers than failure ever could. The imposter syndrome that tells brilliant people their wins were luck. The money blocks rooted in childhood stories we never examined. So Albert writes the way a great teacher talks, in my opinion, like with warmth, with research behind every claim, and with real client stories that make abstract psychology feel devastatingly human. And the happy file exercise alone, a simple handwritten daily log of wins, is worth the price of the book for me, or for anyone, I think, who's ever had a bad day, race a month of good ones. Now, I began reading this or listening to it on Audible thinking I would ask about actors. I finished thinking about leaders and entrepreneurs and creators, everyone who has ever felt secretly unworthy of the success they have worked so hard to build. So if that is you, even a little, Rise Above the Script belongs on your shelf. But for me, read part 4 on fear and success first, then go back to the beginning. You will see yourself on these pages, and then you'll start to understand why that is actually the beginning of the solution. So on that note, congratulations, Albert. We're just going to take that off the screen there.
Thank you.
So you're a very humble guy, and appreciate that. You weren't doing this and all that. So it is live there. So for the audience, when we write a review and post it, which I want you to do on Albert's book, it gets the word out, because people don't know about his work until we talk about it on his behalf. So now you're getting an award. Did you know that, Albert?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so now you do. We're putting the camera back on screen. So have you heard of challenge coins?
No, I haven't.
Well, now you know about them. And so this will come with the award, and I'm going to read it to you. The history of challenge coins, they surfaced during the World War I era, and the practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the Army Special Forces. And carrying the coin at all times and presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with that unit resulted in a number of consequences for those who could not produce a coin. The most popular, Albert, required the coinless soldier to buy a round of drinks. That practice apparently continues today. So these coins are all around the world. The first responders have them. AA, where my dad was for most of his life, had them. I had these done when I started the show, and I said, I want the 1% of people in the world who are making an impact with something they've created and telling their true story to come and get one of these and be part of this community. So that's the coin. They're hand painted and crafted. They're pretty hefty. The front is the show image. The back is the hero's journey narrative by Joseph Campbell's work about how we learn and come back and teach through our adverse situations sometimes. So welcome to the Quiet Warrior community. That's coming to you.
Thank you.
We'll get your address offline, and we'll find a way to get that to you. And before I give you the last word, one more thing for you. And this is called the Warrior Torch. We've been having fun with it. So the last guest wrote a question to ask you, and they didn't know who you were, so they are going to watch the show to hear you answer it. So here we go. So what are you doing every day that you hope in, say, 20 years are the fruits of your efforts right now?
So that's creating a legacy, which means, getting on podcasts, creating content so that it'll live beyond me.
Yeah, it's very cool. Creating content and living beyond you, creating a legacy. There you have it from Albert Bramante. So Albert, tell us where people can get a hold of you and your book or anything else before we wrap this up.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante. You can also find me on Instagram at Dr. Al Bramante. And you can also find me on my website at albertbramante.com. I'd love to get a hold of you.
Well, fantastic. And we'll get all your bio and things in the show notes. So on that note, Albert and everyone, thank you for being here on the Quiet Warrior Show. Find your true purpose and passions in life, but live the life that you deserve and desire. And Albert, welcome to the community. We'll see you again on the Quiet Warrior Show.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you, Tom, for having me on here.
You're welcome, man.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Stand by, Albert. I'm just taking it offline. We're still live here.